Internal validity refers to the degree of confidence. Why things are happening in this particular manner. That is very, very important for us to understand. What is the real problem? Why is the cause of this problem coming into picture? Choosing your participants in random in a manner which they represent the population that you wish to study. When you start studying between internal versus external, they are like two sides of the coin. Good morning and welcome to the session 2 in unit 2 of business research methods, where we are going to talk about an important topic called as validity in experimentation in terms of internal validity and the external validity. Now, going further, we are going to talk about the internal validity, which refers to the degree of confidence that the casual relationship being tested is trustworthy or not, and it's influenced by the factors of other variables. Now, internal validity refers to the degree of confidence. That is, we are going to see whether two variables that has been taken into the research using the causal relationship. I'm again using the word that's causal relationship. That means the root cause analysis between two variables that have been taken for the experimentation has been influencing each other or not. Is there any connection between them or not? Now, in that case, what happens is that when you are going to take those two values and start understanding the relationship between these two variables altogether, that means there is going to be some change factor, there is going to be some, the difference that is going to come into picture. Now, how that is going to work, what are the challenges that are going to work in this is very, very important for us. Now, how is this coming into picture is that if you start looking, now let's say that you are going to talk about the relationship between an employee and the working hours. So we are going to keep performance parameters and we are going to take into account the employee and his working hours altogether. Then automatically there is going to be a causal effect relationship altogether. And that's how we are going to get completely influenced by the variable factor that is going to come into picture. Now, the external validity refers to the extent. Let's understand that word, which the results from study can be applied to the other situation, groups or event. To what extent that particular factor affect, to what extent that moves into the relationship, the thought process altogether in terms of the study, because it might appear to good for certain group, but externally when you are trying to validate it with other groups, with other people, with other situations altogether, there might be a difference, there might be a complete different thought process altogether. So that's why we are going to get into the external validity. Now let's go back to the internal validity and try to understand in depth. Is the extent to which it studies and establishes a trustworthy cause and effect relationship between the treatment and then outcome. So now let me try to make you understand, going back to the same example of employees' performance and the working hours. Now let's assume that an employee works in an organization for more than 12 hours. Now, by working 12 hours, is the performance of the employee going to go up or the performance is going to diminish? We need to study a cause and effect relationship here. Why are we studying this cause and effect relationship? In order to measure the performance. Now, we understand that more the employee is being put into pressure, the more he is being asked to work, automatically his level of performance will come down. This is a general understanding. Now, on the other hand, if we make the employee work for a stipulated number of hours, let's say 6 or 8 hours, with a fixed target, with a fixed objective in mind, automatically the employee's performance will start going up. So now what is happening here is that we are trying to find out a relationship between two variables that we have taken into account. So the working hours and the performance are directly related. Lesser the working hours, more the performance. More the working hours, lesser the performance. This is an internal validity, and this is a trustworthy method. Why I am using that word here is that it establishes a solid confidence and evidence here saying that why things are happening in this particular manner. That is very, very important for us to understand. Now, if you start thinking about this matter, whether it is going to happen or it's not going to happen, then automatically we need to relook into the picture here. So that's why I would always say that it is very, very important that we go back, we think, and we come into the picture altogether. Now, the next thing is that internal validity also reflects that a given study makes it possible to eliminate alternative explanations for a finding. So the internal validity, which means to say that it also reflects that a study makes it possible to eliminate the alternative explanations. So once you need to start understanding the internal validity, you don't have to start getting into the alternatives for it, because you know the root cause of why things are happening. So let's try to get into that picture now. Once you know the truth, it is very easy for you to go forward and conduct the experiment far more better. Rather than going into the false expressions, false ideas, or false notations altogether, let's get on to a system which is actually trying to make you understand what is the real problem, where is the real cause that is hidden or situated here. So that is why I would say that internal validity has got a more potential when compared to that of the external factors. Now, the second thing is that internal validity is not a yes or no type of concept. That let us understand this first. Why? Because internal validity is not an objective testing. It is not about just asking preferences or choices. It is not about just asking a straightforward, closed-ended question. It is more about a research-oriented, intensive type of question which requires some amount of thinking. So that's why instead we consider how confident we can be with the findings of the study based on whether it avoids traps or that makes the findings questionable. Now, what we do in an internal validity is that we go further down the study to understand what is the real problem, why is the cause of this problem coming into picture. Now, we understand one thing very, very close and very, very clear enough, that sometime down the lane, sometime down the valley, there is some factors of change that is coming into picture. Now, if that factors what we have analyzed and understood is clear, then we don't have to worry, we can proceed with the research. But then, if we start understanding that the research is not trending according to the path, according to the lead altogether, then we are out of picture. That means internal validity will make you think whether you are going on the right track, on the right approach to understand what we are doing is correct or not. So that is why this becomes a very, very important function altogether. The next thing, the internal validity, there is a less chance for confounding in a study. The higher the internal validity, the more confident we can be in the findings. So, higher the internal validity. Now, that is a very, very, very important part which I would like to say. Higher the internal, which means the extent of research that has gone inside in terms of understanding the value, in terms of understanding the entire picture, then automatically the research will have a better finding, a better outcome altogether. So better the research, better the outcome. So that is where I would say that internal validity rises the confidence of the researcher and makes him prove that his research is truly a validated one. Following which, confounding refers to a situation in which other factors come into play that confuses the outcome of the study. Now, the confounding factor, what is this I would like to talk about is, sometimes you would see that when you are going in a research track or in a research path, There might be other distractions that will come, or distractive factors altogether that suddenly comes into the research. Why those factors come into the research? Because they want to deviate the researcher out of the track. They will confuse, they will try to bring in different ideas and methodologies by which the researcher will get into problem. Let us not do that. We are not in for confusion. We don't want to do that confusion. We want to understand that this is the thing. Let's take it up. Let's finish up the problem. So in that case, we don't want to get into further confusions. Now, for instance, a study might make us unsure as to whether we can trust that we can be identified on the above cause and effect scenario. So that is very, very important for us. Why? Because now when we study about a particular instance, about a particular ideology, we get an idea. We come to know what is the cause and effect relationship. What is that has gone through in that research for this particular outcome to be received. So that is why internal validity is a very, very important. Followed by, in short, you can only be confident that your study is internally valid if you can rule out any other alternatives. This is the answer and this is the only answer. That is what we need to understand about this internal validity. Moment you start having a doubt or you have a second thought about whether this is correct or not, internal validity gets ruled out. Internally, if you are not strong, externally, you will not be able to produce your results. So that's why I say internal validity holds a long, long way in terms of making you understand what it is. Why is that particular factor coming into picture and why do we need to do things in that manner? So that is why I would always say that this is a very, very important concept in the long run. It cannot be taken so easily. You just have to go further in terms of understanding the internal validity. You have to understand what are all the changes, what are all the effect, what are all the factors, and based on that, you will be able to get this thing. Now, there are three criteria in this study. The first one is the cause preceded the effect in terms of time value. So that is also very, very important for us to understand. The cause and effect vary together. That is possible. There are no likely explanations for this relationship that you have observed. So look into this three factor. The first one, cause is more than the effect. That is why it has happened. Because of this only it is happening, and that is what is the truth. The second one, there is a cause, there is an effect, but both of them can vary. So I would say if cause is C1 and the effect is E1, both of them can vary depending on the situation. But in this case, the C1 is greater than E1. Cause is greater than that of the expectation value altogether, which means to say that absolutely this has got a greater value, a greater stand altogether. So that is why I say that cause is always greater than that one, the effect. Now, there are second thing which I would like to say, there are no other likely explanations for this relationship that you have observed. I do not find any meaning at all. I might think that this is not working at all. So this is the way I would like to come back and say that there is no relationship, there is no effect, there is no methodology at all what we are trying to do. So in that sense, absolutely this is not working out for me. So this is something which I am not seen at all in the experiment. This is not what can be coming into the picture of explanation. So I would like to rule this one out of the experiment. The next thing, factors that will improve the internal validity. The first thing is called as blinding. Let's understand this word. It's called blinding. Participants and sometimes researchers who are unaware of what interventions they are receiving, such as using a placebo in a meditation study to avoid this knowledge biasing perceptions, behaviors, and thus the outcome of the study. Now, one thing is that the blinding factor, which means to say that sometime when you are unaware about what intervention they are receiving, to avoid this knowledge biasing, basically to avoid it, the perceptions and behavior, and thus the outcome can be better. So you can remove the bias factor out of your thought process, out of your entire research, and you will be able to get a better research outcome. So in that sense, internal validity always becomes even more effective. Remove the bias factor. Don't get on to the matter saying that yes, I know everything, this is how it will happen, this is a superstitious thought process, so things will be exactly like this. Don't go with these kind of thought process. Don't have that blinding factor altogether. When I use the word blinding, it is not just binding, it's blinding, which means just putting across a blind piece of cloth, just a black piece of cloth across your eyes and saying that this is how it will happen. Let's not blind ourselves towards the light, towards the knowledge. Let's go explore the knowledge. Let's find out what is the real cause, and then we will be able to do it. Followed by the experimental manipulation. That is very, very important factor. Manipulation is an independent variable in a study. Instance, giving smokers a cessation program, or for example, I've taken some examples here which is trying to make you understand the association without any intervention. Now, what is this manipulation all about is that you try to receive answers as quick as possible, as clear as possible by manipulating the variable. So what happens here is that you would have not actually got the answer, but you are trying to create a pathway through which you will reach the answer. You are manipulating, you are creating your own path, you are adjusting the variables according to your need. This is not needed actually. If you can remove the manipulation and if you can start working towards a constructive exercise, automatically the internal validity can improve. The next one, random selection. Choosing your participants in random in a manner which they represent the population that you wish to study. Now this is one thing which I would always say, that when you get on to the random population, you get a random result altogether. That is almost a fixed truth which I would like to say. On a random basis, when you select your own team, when you select the factors altogether, you get a very, very clear answer. It's a random. It's just like how you wanted to select, you've selected it, and you are able to validate that exercise altogether. Followed by randomization. Random sample is where you select the sample group, but randomization is assigning the participants to treatment and control groups and ensure that there is only not one systematic bias, not any kind of bias inside the group. So randomization is where you go on a rapid method, assigning the participants to treatment and control groups. Ensure that there is no any systematic bias. There is no bias at all in terms of getting these things done altogether. Followed by the study protocol. What is the study protocol? Following specific procedures for administration of treatment so that you don't introduce any side effects or any negative effect. You follow a protocol, you follow a timetable, you follow a decorum, you follow a methodology that is clear-cut, prescribed altogether. That will actually help you to understand the situation, that will help you to understand how the system is moving altogether. That is why I would say that this protocol is very, very important. This will actually help you to understand things in a far better manner. The next thing is that what is the external validity altogether? Why external validity matters to us? Now, external validity refers to how well the outcome of the study can be expected to apply for other settings. So using one experiment, I have got a result. Can I try to apply the results on the external, on the other groups? In other words, this validity is how generalizable findings are. Like this only, can I see 100 more experiments, 100 more effect altogether? So using one result, I'm going to generalize the entire protocol here. And is it valid? Yes. For example, if I just take on a random basis that people normally tend to shop on a regular basis during the weekend, and if I try to generalize that statement across all groups, all age, then I'm getting into an external validity feature altogether. So you can have a ecological validity, an aspect of external validity, which refers to a study of findings that is generalized to the real world as far as possible. The next thing is what are the factors that we need to improve the external validity? One, consider the psychological realism. See, we always tell that there is a psychological factor that always binds the variables and factors together. Now, for example, when you are able to make your participants understand this factor, that what exactly drives them to do something, that means you are improving on the psychological factors. You are telling them as an event, as an history altogether, which will actually help you to attain that external validity. The next thing is, do the reprocessing or calibration. Again and again, try to use statistical methods, use the different characters, validate the factors and everything, put it together, try see it that whether you are able to get better results or activated results group altogether. That will help you to understand the external validity, because you cannot just get convinced with the factor that one time I got the result, every time it will be the same. No, that cannot happen. So you need to calibrate, you need to evaluate again and again to see the results. The next thing is replicate it. Now, conduct the study again with different samples or in a different settings to see whether you are able to get the same results. Is it possible? When many studies have been conducted, meta-analysis can also be used to determine the effect of independent variable, whether it is reliable. It is following. Try the field experiments, try to conduct a study outside the laboratory, try to see whether it's available in a natural setting, whether it is applicable in a regular manner, and use the inclusion and exclusion criteria, where you are including the sample population and also excluding certain sectors of population which is not needed. So by doing this factor, you will be able to tell whether the external validity is stronger or not. The next thing is that when you start studying between internal versus external, they are like two sides of the coin. So I would always say you have to study with good internal validity, but overall it should be, it could not be made irrelevant to the world. So there should also be a factor of external validity coming into picture. On the other hand, when you conduct a field study which is highly relevant to the real world, you know that this doesn't have a trustworthy results, then knowing what variables that cause the outcome will help you to study better. So both the internal validity and the external validity will help you to understand how a research can be replicated, can be taken forward to the real world, try to see the outcomes of it, and then we can develop a real model that is helpful for the modern business world. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that this session was of a great help and resource to you. In the upcoming sessions, we will be seeing more about the research-based experiments and ideas which is applicable to the modern business world. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.